The spaceship hovered above Earth's surface, its shining metal body glinting in the golden rays of the morning sun. The crowd below gazed in awe as it gently landed, like a giant silver bird touching down. People from all over the world had gathered to witness this momentous event, the arrival of the Xynarans, the first aliens to ever step foot on Earth. The hatch of the spaceship opened with a soft hiss and all eyes turned toward it. Out stepped the princess, the figure everyone had been waiting for. She was unlike any human woman, they knew that. Her skin shimmered a delicate shade of lavender, almost glowing under the sunlight. Her long, flowing hair was silver, moving like silk in the wind. She wore an elegant gown that seemed to change colors with every step, like a cascade of soft, shimmering light. But as stunning as she was, there was something unusual about her. While the other members of the Xynaran delegation stood tall, proud, and confident, the princess hesitated. Her head was slightly lowered and her eyes were wide, scanning the crowd with a mixture of wonder and fear. She didn't walk like the others. She moved slowly, her steps measured, almost as if she were afraid. The crowd, filled with excitement and whispers, quickly surrounded the other Xynarans. They admired their technological marvels, their otherworldly knowledge, and their commanding presence. The princess, however, remained on the sidelines, her presence almost unnoticed. She was beautiful, yes, but there was something about her that made her seem distant, fragile. Her quiet demeanor made her an enigma, and many didn't know how to approach her. As she stood at the edge of the crowd, she felt invisible. She wasn't a part of the excitement that buzzed around her delegation. She wasn't part of the proud, confident smiles and greetings. Instead, she felt like a shadow, unnoticed and alone. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of nerves and loneliness. She had never been good at these kinds of events. She was supposed to be a symbol, a bridge between two worlds, but all she felt was fear and doubt. She wasn't strong or outgoing like the others in her group. She wasn't ready to be the center of attention, even though that's exactly what was expected of her. Her large, sparkling eyes looked down, away from the eyes of the humans. She wanted to shrink, to disappear into the walls of the grand space around her. She had never been good at standing in front of crowds. She had always felt more comfortable in her own world on her home planet of Xynara, where she could wander the vast fields and forests without anyone judging her. Here, on Earth, surrounded by strange faces and strange customs, she felt out of place. A soft breeze brushed past her and she shivered, wrapping her arms around herself for comfort. It wasn't the cold that made her shiver. It was the fear, the pressure. All she wanted was to blend in, to be seen as more than just a princess. But the expectations of her people weighed heavily on her shoulders. They had sent her here not just as a symbol of peace, but as a leader, someone to bring the Xynarans and humans together. But what if she could? What if she failed? The thought of not living up to her people's expectations made her stomach churn. She had spent her entire life being told how important she was, how vital she was to the future of their world. But here, on this strange planet, she felt smaller than ever. She wasn't sure how to handle the pressure, the eyes that seemed to follow her every move. For a long moment she stood alone in the crowd, the sounds of laughter and conversation swirling around her, yet she felt disconnected from it all. She longed for someone, anyone, to notice her for who she was, not just as the alien princess, but as a person, fragile and unsure, just like anyone else. And yet, despite the chaos around her, she remained on the sidelines, alone, invisible. Little did she know, that was about to change. The grand hall was filled with laughter, music, and the soft clinking of glasses. It was a celebration like no other, a historic event marking the first meeting between Earth and the Xynarans. Humans from all over the world had gathered to honor their visitors, exchanging excited words and curious glances. The air was thick with anticipation, as everyone eagerly awaited the promises of peace and knowledge that the Xynarans would bring. The princess stood at the edge of the room, her lavender skin gleaming under the warm lights, but she felt as if she were a ghost in the midst of the vibrant crowd. She could hear the laughter, see the animated conversations, but none of it reached her. She wasn't part of the festivities. The humans and Xynarans around her were busy exchanging words with ease, forming connections and alliances. But she was left standing in the background, watching it all unfold from a distance. Her heart beat loudly in her chest, a constant reminder of her loneliness. She could feel the weight of her title pressing down on her, but it only made her feel more distant, more disconnected. She was supposed to be important, a symbol of peace and unity between two worlds. Yet in this sea of strangers, she felt small. She felt like a shadow, cast aside in a room full of shining stars. As she watched the others mingle, she couldn't help but notice how easily they moved. They laughed, they shook hands, they exchanged stories. The princess tried to step forward to join the conversation, but every time she did, she froze. Her mind went blank and her voice felt stuck in her throat. What if they didn't understand her? What if they laughed at her or, worse, ignored her altogether? The thought of being ignored again made her stomach twist in knots. She had spent so many years being told that she was important, that she had a role to play, but now she wasn't sure if anyone even saw her. Her skin flushed with embarrassment, and her hands trembled slightly as she tried to keep them still at her sides. She wasn't used to this feeling, the feeling of being invisible. Her eyes wandered across the room, landing on a group of Xynaran diplomats deep in conversation with a few humans. They were laughing, gesturing animatedly, and exchanging knowledge. They had no time for her. She wasn't like them, confident, outgoing, and eloquent. She was different, quiet, and unsure of herself. She longed to be a part of the conversation, to feel connected to someone, but she didn't know how. She looked down at her hands, fiddling nervously with the delicate fabric of her gown. She had always been told that she was the future, that she would lead her people toward a brighter future. But how could she do that when she couldn't even speak to anyone here? How could she unite two worlds when she felt like an outsider in both? The princess took a slow, steady breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Maybe she was just being too sensitive. Maybe everyone else was too busy to notice her, but that didn't mean they didn't care. Perhaps it was all in her head, but even as she tried to convince herself, she couldn't shake the feeling of loneliness that clung to her. As the night wore on, the princess found herself growing more and more tired, tired of pretending to be confident, tired of standing at the edge of the crowd, waiting for someone to notice her. She longed for the warmth of connection, for the simple comfort of a friendly face. But the room felt so vast, so distant. She was surrounded by people, but she had never felt more alone. She sighed softly and looked down again, her eyes fixed on the floor as she tried to hide her vulnerability. It felt like she was invisible to the world, and that hurt more than she was willing to admit. But little did she know, across the room, someone had noticed her. Someone who wasn't concerned with her title, her status, or her beauty. Someone who would see her for who she truly was, and that someone was about to change everything. Among the bustling crowd of diplomats, curious humans, and alien visitors, Jack stood quietly by the edge of the room. His hands were shoved into his pockets, his eyes scanning the scene in front of him. He wasn't a part of this grand celebration. He was just an ordinary worker hired to assist with the event. But as he looked around at the Xynaran delegation, his attention was drawn to her. The princess. She stood alone, her figure shimmering with an ethereal glow, yet surrounded by a sea of people who didn't seem to see her at all. The others in her group were speaking with humans, exchanging laughter and ideas, while the princess stood in the background, her head lowered, her gaze distant. Jack couldn't help but notice how out of place she looked. Her beauty was undeniable, yes, but it was clear that something inside her was struggling. She didn't belong there, not in the way the others did. He wondered if anyone else noticed. It was easy to get caught up in the excitement of the event, the significance of meeting beings from another world, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness for the princess. She wasn't like the others, and it was clear she didn't want to be noticed. But Jack couldn't just walk by. There was something about her, something that made him want to know more. It wasn't that he saw her as a symbol of peace or a powerful alien princess. To him, she was just a person who looked lonely, like she needed someone to see her, to acknowledge that she existed, not just as a princess, but as an individual. He didn't care about the grandeur, the status, or the expectations. He cared about the quiet sadness in her eyes, the way she seemed to shrink into herself, as if the weight of the world was pressing her down. Jack's heart softened. He could see how uncomfortable she was. The way she fidgeted with the fabric of her gown, her shoulders hunched slightly as if bracing for something. She looked like she wanted to disappear, and Jack couldn't stand the thought of anyone, feeling so invisible. He took a deep breath, gathering his courage. He wasn't sure what he could say, what he could do, but he knew he had to try. There was a part of him that wanted to step forward, to walk over and just say something, anything, that might make her feel less alone. Slowly, Jack began to make his way through the crowd. He tried to be casual, not drawing attention to himself, not making a big deal out of it. After all, he was just a regular guy and she was a princess. What could he possibly offer her? But as he drew closer, he saw her eyes shift nervously, her gaze flicking up toward him. She looked startled, almost like a deer caught in the headlights. Jack stopped a few feet away, giving her space, but he didn't look away. He smiled softly, trying to reassure her with his presence. "Hi," he said gently, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you all right?" The princess blinked in surprise, clearly caught off guard by his question. Her lavender eyes widened as if unsure whether she had heard him correctly. She wasn't used to someone speaking to her like this, not with awe or reverence, but with simple curiosity and kindness. She had expected people to avoid her, to treat her as a symbol rather than a person. But here was Jack, a human, asking her if she was all right. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. Her throat tightened, and she felt a rush of emotions she hadn't expected. She had always been told she was important, that she was needed for the future of both her world and Earth, but no one had ever asked her how she felt. No one had cared about her feelings until now. She opened her mouth, but the words stuck. She wanted to say something, to explain that she was just overwhelmed, but she couldn't find the right words. Instead, she simply nodded slightly, unsure of what to do next. Her heart raced in her chest. Why was this human speaking to her like this? Why wasn't he focused on her title, on her beauty, on her position? Jack seemed to sense her hesitation. He didn't push her. He didn't try to force her to speak. He just stood there, waiting, his presence calm and comforting. The princess, for the first time that evening, didn't feel like she had to hide. She didn't feel like a foreign object, something to be admired from a distance. She was just a person, standing there with another person. "I'm Jack," he said after a moment, his voice steady and kind. I couldn't help but notice you standing here alone. Is there anything I can do to help?" The princess finally found her voice. She managed a soft smile, her eyes glimmering with a mix of gratitude and surprise. I'm fine, thank you." But Jack didn't turn away. He simply nodded, his expression warm and understanding. "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. You don't have to stand alone." The princess felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't grand or spectacular. It wasn't a declaration of love or admiration. It was something simpler, something more real, a human connection based on kindness and understanding. And for the first time that night, she didn't feel invisible. As the evening stretched on, the princess found herself standing near the edge of the room again. The crowd had grown louder, more animated as the night continued, but she remained quietly out of place. Her lavender eyes scanned the room, but this time there was something different. There was no longer the same overwhelming sense of loneliness. Her heart wasn't as heavy as before, and she could breathe a little easier. Jack's kind words had stayed with her. He hadn't made her feel small, hadn't expected anything from her. He had simply acknowledged her as a person, and not just as a royal figure. For the first time, she didn't feel the pressure of being perfect. The weight of her title, which she had carried all evening, seemed a little lighter. And yet, despite this small shift, she still felt unsure. The room was full of so many people, so much laughter and movement. She felt like an outsider, still unsure of how to fit in. The princess had always known that she was different, that she didn't have the confidence of others in her delegation. But now, something about Jack's kindness made her want to be braver. She wanted to speak to him again, but she didn't know how. What could she say? What could she do? It was then that she saw him again. Jack had noticed her from across the room. His eyes found her, and even in the busy sea of people, it was as though she was the only one he saw. He made his way toward her, his steps slow but steady, cutting through the crowd without hesitation. The moment she noticed him walking toward her, her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure why, but his presence comforted her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her chest. She wasn't sure what to expect this time. But as he drew nearer, Jack smiled, his warm, gentle smile that seemed to melt away all the walls she had built up around herself. She felt herself relax, just a little. He didn't look at her as if she were some kind of puzzle to solve or a mysterious figure to admire. He looked at her like she was just a person. "Hi again," Jack said softly when he reached her, his voice low but kind. The princess blinked, surprised by the ease in his voice. "Hello," she replied, her own voice quieter than she wanted it to be. There was a moment of silence between them. The bustling sounds of the crowd seemed far away, almost like a distant hum. For the first time that evening, the princess didn't feel the weight of all the eyes on her. She wasn't sure why Jack made her feel this way, but it was a relief. "I hope I'm not bothering you," Jack said, his expression open and honest. "But I wanted to check in. You looked, I don't know, a little lonely earlier." The princess felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. No one had said that to her before, not in that way. They had all seen her as a princess, a symbol, a figure to be admired from afar. But Jack, simple and kind, saw her as a person, a real person. "I wasn't sure how to fit in," she said quietly, her words almost as soft as a whisper. She felt embarrassed admitting it, but there was something in Jack's gaze that made her feel safe, like she could be honest for once. "I don't really know how to be a part of all this." Jack didn't respond immediately. He just listened, and that alone made the princess feel heard. She hadn't realized how much she longed to be seen, not as a princess, but as herself. She hadn't realized how lonely she had been until now. "Maybe," Jack said after a moment, "you don't need to try to fit in. Maybe you just need to be yourself. That's enough." The princess blinked, taken aback by his simple, honest words. It was as if he could see right through the armor she had put up for so long. She had been taught to be strong, to represent her people, to never show weakness. But Jack made her feel like it was okay to just be who she was, quiet, shy, and uncertain at times. She didn't know how to respond. Instead, she simply smiled softly, the corners of her lips lifting for the first time that evening. Jack smiled back. It was a quiet, knowing smile, as though he understood her more than she realized. "You know," Jack continued, "sometimes it's not about fitting in. It's about finding people who make you feel comfortable enough to just be yourself." The princess felt her heart soften. She looked at Jack, her gaze steady now, no longer filled with the same doubt and uncertainty. She realized then that it wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about impressing everyone around her. It was about being true to who she was, even if that meant feeling a little vulnerable at times. She nodded slowly, her hands folding together in front of her. For the first time that night, she didn't feel like running away. For the first time, she felt like she belonged, if only in this moment with Jack. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice full of gratitude. "You're right, I don't need to try so hard." Jack smiled, his eyes bright with understanding. "Any time," he said simply, "any time." And for the first time since her arrival on Earth, the princess felt a glimmer of peace. Maybe she didn't have to be anything more than herself. Maybe, just maybe, that was enough. As the evening went on, the princess found herself drawn to Jack again. She wasn't sure what had changed. Maybe it was his calm presence, or maybe it was the way he made her feel like she wasn't alone in the world. Whatever it was, she couldn't deny the comfort she found in his company. The crowd around them had started to thin out. The excitement of the night was winding down and people were beginning to head toward the exit. But the princess didn't move. She found herself standing next to Jack, unsure of what to do next. She had never been good at socializing, at making small talk with strangers, but with Jack it felt different. It didn't feel forced. She didn't have to pretend to be someone she was. Jack turned to her, his expression warm. "Would you like to sit down for a bit?" he asked, his voice gentle. She hesitated for only a moment before nodding. She didn't want to be alone again, not now. Not when she finally felt like she could be herself, like someone cared enough to listen. They found a quiet corner of the hall, away from the main crowd. The soft hum of the music played in the background, and the dim lights gave the room a peaceful, almost intimate atmosphere. Jack sat down first and then looked at her, waiting for her to join him. The princess sat next to him, her legs crossed and her hands resting in her lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't awkward, though. There was a strange kind of comfort in the silence between them. Finally, Jack spoke. "So how's it been? I mean, this whole event. I can't imagine how overwhelming it must be." The princess looked at him, surprised. No one had asked her that before. No one had cared enough to ask how she was feeling. They only wanted to know about her role, her title, and the future of her people. But Jack wasn't interested in any of that. He just wanted to know how she was. "It's been hard," she admitted quietly, her voice almost a whisper. She wasn't used to being this open, but with Jack it felt right. "I'm supposed to be the symbol of peace between our worlds, but I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Jack didn't respond right away. Instead, he just looked at her, his eyes steady and understanding. He didn't try to offer quick solutions or empty words of comfort. He just let her speak, and that was more than enough. "I've always been told that I need to be perfect," the princess continued, her voice barely audible. "That I have to represent my people, make the right decisions, be everything everyone expects me to be. But I don't feel like I'm any of those things. I feel like I'm pretending, like I'm not really me." Jack nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving her face. "I get that," he said quietly. "I think everyone feels that way sometimes, like they have to be something they're not. But the thing is, you don't have to be perfect. No one does, you just have to be real, that's what matters." The princess looked at him, unsure of what to say. His words felt strange but comforting. She had never thought about it that way before. She had always believed that she had to be something more than she was, that her title defined her, that her role as a princess was all she could ever be. But Jack was telling her something different. He was telling her that she was enough just as she was. "But what if I fail?" she asked, her voice tinged with fear. "What if I'm not what everyone expects me to be?" Jack didn't answer right away. He just smiled gently, his eyes soft with understanding. "Then you fail, and you get up and you try again. We all fail, but that doesn't make us less. It just makes us human. Or, well, in your case, Zainaran." He chuckled lightly, trying to bring a little humor into the conversation. The princess couldn't help but smile. It was the first time in a long while that she had felt even a little lighter. Jack wasn't trying to solve her problems. He wasn't offering her solutions or advice that felt out of reach. He was just letting her know that it was okay to be imperfect. It was okay to struggle. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. "Do you ever feel like you're not enough?" the princess asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She hadn't meant to ask, but the question slipped out before she could stop it. Jack looked at her for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful. "Yeah," he said softly, "I think everyone does. We all have moments when we feel like we're not enough. But I think maybe that's part of being human. We're always trying to be more, to do more. But the truth is, we're already enough, just by being here, just by being ourselves." The princess sat quietly, absorbing his words. She had always believed that she had to be something greater, that her worth was defined by her role, her title, and her people. But Jack was telling her that she didn't have to be anything more than what she was in that moment. She didn't have to be perfect, and that was something she had never allowed herself to believe before. For the first time in her life, she felt like she could breathe. For the first time, she felt like maybe she was enough, just as she was. And it was the most freeing feeling she had ever known. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. You've made me see things differently." Jack smiled warmly, his eyes filled with kindness. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could help." The princess smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. She realized then that she didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, she could take things one step at a time, and that was enough. Part 6: The Hand. As the evening stretched into night, the atmosphere in the grand hall had shifted. The music had softened, and the clink of glasses was replaced by quieter conversations. Most of the guests had begun to leave, but the princess didn't feel the urgency to follow. She felt a strange sense of calm that hadn't been there when she first arrived. Something had changed in her, something she couldn't fully explain. It was as if the world had slowed down just for a moment, allowing her to breathe. Jack, who had been with her for the past hour, had become her anchor. His kindness, his ability to make her feel like she was enough, had started to chip away at the walls she had spent so long building. He hadn't tried to fix her, hadn't offered empty reassurances. He had simply listened and understood, and that was all she needed. It was a kind of friendship she hadn't known she craved. She glanced around the room, noticing the last few guests saying their goodbyes. Her eyes returned to Jack, who was sitting beside her, looking out over the dimming room. For a moment, the princess hesitated. She had felt so uncertain for so long, so disconnected from everyone, but with Jack, things felt different. She wasn't alone. "What now?" she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. Jack turned to her, his face lighting up with a warm smile. "I'm not sure, but it seems like the night's almost over." The princess nodded, her gaze lingering on him. She could feel the weight of the evening lifting off her shoulders. She had spent so much time trying to live up to expectations, trying to be someone she wasn't, that she had forgotten what it felt like to just exist as herself. Tonight, Jack had shown her that it was okay to be vulnerable. It was okay to not have all the answers. The princess glanced toward the doors of the hall, her eyes momentarily distant. "I never thought it would feel this way," she said softly, almost to herself. "To be here in this world with all these people. I thought it would be easier, but I didn't know how lonely it could be." Jack's expression softened. He leaned in slightly, as if understanding the weight of her words. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "Not as long as I'm here." The princess blinked, surprised by his words. She had expected many things tonight, but never this. She had been told that her destiny was to be a leader, to bring together two worlds. But in that moment, she realized that it was more than just the title or the role she had to play. It was about connection. It was about finding someone who understood, someone who saw her for who she truly was, not for the crown on her head. For a moment, she thought about how much she had held back, how many walls she had built between herself and the world. She had been so afraid of being hurt, of failing, of disappointing others. But now, she felt a strange sense of courage blooming inside her. Jack had helped her realize that there was strength in vulnerability, in allowing herself to be seen. Without thinking, she extended her hand toward him, her palm open. Her heart fluttered as she waited for him to respond. She wasn't sure why she did it. Perhaps it was the desire for something more, or perhaps it was simply the need to acknowledge the bond that had formed between them. She was no longer afraid of reaching out. Jack looked at her hand for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then, without hesitation, he reached out and took her hand in his. His grip was warm and firm, and the contact sent a surge of comfort through the princess. For the first time that evening, she didn't feel like she was carrying the world on her shoulders. She felt lighter, freer, as if the simple act of holding hands had unburdened her. "You're not alone," Jack repeated, his voice calm and steady. "You don't have to carry all this by yourself." The princess felt her heart swell at his words. She squeezed his hand gently, feeling the connection between them grow stronger. She had spent so much time trying to hide her weaknesses, trying to be something she wasn't, but now she realized that it was okay to let someone in. It was okay to need others. The room around them seemed to fade away as they sat there, hand in hand. The weight of expectations, of duty, of fear, it all seemed less important in this moment. What mattered now was the quiet, unspoken understanding between them. What mattered was the sense of peace she felt, knowing that she didn't have to face the world alone. For the first time that night, the princess felt a sense of belonging. It wasn't in the grandeur of the event or the admiration of her people. It was here, in this simple moment, with Jack beside her. It was in the warmth of his hand, the quiet comfort of his presence, and the truth that, despite everything, she was enough. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to carry the world on her shoulders. All she needed was this moment, and in that moment she was exactly where she was meant to be, with Jack. The evening had grown still, the soft hum of the music now the only sound in the grand hall. The once bustling room had slowly emptied, leaving only a few lingering guests who chatted quietly among themselves. But the princess didn't mind the quiet. For the first time that night, she felt peaceful. The weight of her title, her duty, her insecurities, everything that had kept her distant from everyone else, seemed to melt away in the presence of Jack. She sat next to him on the edge of the hall, their hands still lightly clasped together. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need to. They had shared a quiet understanding, a connection that didn't need words to be real. The princess glanced around at the emptying room, the glow of the chandeliers casting a warm light across the floor. The soft rhythm of the music swirled through the air, inviting and gentle. She couldn't help but feel the pull of it. "You know," Jack said softly, breaking the silence, "I've always thought the best part of any evening is the last song, when the crowd clears, and it's just the music and the people who really matter." The princess looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. He was smiling, that same warm, reassuring smile that had made her feel seen, heard, and understood all night. She knew what he was suggesting, and for a moment she felt a rush of nervousness. She had never danced in front of anyone like this, especially not in such a grand setting. But there was something about Jack, something in his eyes that made her feel safe. He didn't expect perfection. He didn't expect anything from her, but the chance to be herself. Jack stood slowly, extending his hand to her once again, his gaze steady and kind. "May I have this dance?" The princess hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure if she was ready to take such a step, to let go of all the doubts that had held her back. She wasn't the confident, graceful figure that most people expected her to be. She was shy, unsure, and far from perfect. But as she looked into Jack's eyes, she realized something. She didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to be real. And in this moment with Jack, she could do that. Slowly she stood, her fingers slipping into his hand. He led her onto the dance floor and she followed, her steps tentative at first, unsure of herself. The music filled the room, soft and flowing, a beautiful rhythm that seemed to speak directly to her heart. Jack didn't rush her. He simply guided her, his hand warm and gentle in hers, giving her the space she needed to find her balance. For the first time, the princess wasn't thinking about her title, her duty, or her fears. She wasn't thinking about how she was supposed to move or what anyone would think. All she could think about was the rhythm of the music, the softness of Jack's touch, and the way he made her feel, like she belonged just as she was. They moved together slowly at first, then with more confidence as the song carried them across the floor. Jack's steps were steady, unhurried, and the princess felt herself relaxing into the dance, letting go of the tightness in her chest. The weight of the world seemed to disappear with every step, every turn. She wasn't just a princess. She wasn't just a symbol of peace. She was herself with Jack in this beautiful moment that felt like it was just for them. As the music swirled around them, the princess felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, joy, true, unburdened joy. She laughed softly, a sound she hadn't made in what felt like forever. Jack laughed too, his smile wide and genuine, as if this moment was exactly where he was meant to be. The dance wasn't perfect. There were moments when their feet didn't quite match the rhythm, when they stumbled. but that didn't matter. What mattered was that they were together, sharing something real, something raw and beautiful. The princess's heart swelled as she looked up at Jack. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "For everything, for being kind to me, for seeing me." Jack smiled, his eyes soft with affection. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could help." She smiled back, feeling a sense of warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just Jack's kindness that had helped her. It was his ability to see her, truly see her, without judgment or expectation. It was his willingness to simply be there for her in a way that no one else had ever done before. The song began to fade, the final notes lingering in the air. The dance slowed, and Jack brought her gently to a stop. They stood there, hand in hand, the silence between them comfortable and filled with meaning. The princess felt a peaceful calm settle over her, a sense of belonging she had never known before. For the first time in her life, she wasn't focused on what she was supposed to be. She wasn't thinking about her responsibilities or her role. She was just a person, sharing a moment with someone who cared, someone who saw her for who she truly was. And in that moment, the princess realized something profound. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. She was enough just as she was. The song ended, but the moment didn't. It would stay with her long after the music had faded, a reminder that sometimes the most important thing was to simply be present, to be yourself, and to let someone in.